Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too. For the complex, but they also handle all bookings and serve as primary point of contact for that facility and for the people that lease it, even for the long-term leases. So for the stampede and the storm, S&G acts as the agent for the city in terms of negotiating those agreements and as well as managing those agreements and making sure we're maintaining them going forward. They handle the general maintenance for the facility. They really are there to identify and work with the city to identify major capital improvement projects that are needed for it over time. They are in charge of marketing and advertising for the facility, so they work with all of those options and handle the funds that are generated through the marketing and advertising opportunities. They also work in identifying major sponsorships for it. So the naming rights and the title sponsorship, that was all developed by the city when it was initially opened, but there's ongoing naming rights things for different areas of the facility, and so S&G has been really critical in helping to identify those opportunities and then working to negotiate with those potential sponsorship options, and then keeping the city always aware of what those opportunities are and what's being negotiated. But then if there is a naming rights type of issue, those do come to the city to be approved and ultimately by the city council. So, and then they also, as I talk about, Spectra is the other major is part of the agreement, and because it's a 5-year agreement, there's small escalators in that for every year. But a major portion of that fee is what we call the incentive management fee, and the reason that's built in there is to really be an incentive for performance. So we want to continue to see and an average of the last 2 years. So we're always progressively wanting to see the performance go up every year, and they're incentivized financially to make that happen. And so it's a win-win from the city's perspective because it helps us and our community, but it's a win for the management company as well. So the better they perform, the better we do, the more they're incentivized as well. When we entered into that agreement as well, S&G committed a $500,000 contribution, which was utilized for capital improvements for that facility. So that was put in on the front end when we renegotiated the contract back in January, and I believe we've utilized most of those funds at this point.
We have utilized most of the investment funds from SMG for the AV upgrade, and we are currently have a little bit of money left in the Spectra investments.
In terms of the operating accounts, so we have separate accounts that are handled by S&G for where all the revenues and expenses for the event center are paid out of from an operating perspective. That account is really held in trust on behalf of the city. So Spectra manages that account as is typical of a management company when we have a third-party manager, but that account is owned by, in essence, the city, or held in trust for the city. The one thing I kind of showed on here is kind of the net equity position. So it'd be one thing to show our cash balance, but because S&G holds a lot of deposits, they have advanced ticket sales, they take a lot of things in advance, just looking at the cash deposits that's sitting in the account isn't a good reflection of how it's performing overall. What you really want to look at is what the net equity position is. So what is the position of the event center campus, or S&G's, and this includes the Orpheum, for the last 5 years. So once you've taken all of your assets into account, less all of your liabilities, where have we sat over the last 5 years? And as you can see, our net equity position has grown over time. So we started off at 2014 with an ending net equity position of $400,000, and by 2018 that had grown to $3.7 million. So overall, from that perspective, on the operations side, it has been positive, and it has continued to grow every year. So every year we've seen progress in terms of that position, and that again is an asset of the city. We report that net equity position as part of our financials for the city. The other major contractor we have out there is Spectra. So when the event center again was initially developed, they went out for a separate RFP for the food and beverage side of the facilities. And at that time, we again reviewed several proposals, and Spectra was selected as the proposal that we would move forward with from the food and beverage side. And I believe Spectra had previously managed the convention center for it prior to that, correct?
Comcast Spectra Core, yeah, it was Global Spectrum managed it, but Spectra Core was their, or Spectra was their food and beverage provider.
So, like SMG, we had some history. I believe SMG had previously managed the Orpheum Theater going back many years. We have had some previous experience with what is now Spectra. And so, ultimately, they were selected for handling the food and beverage side. And again, they handle all the same facilities. It mirrors what SMG covers. In terms of the management side, Spectra handles the food and beverage side. And it's similar to SMG, the ballpark was added, stadium was added to Spectra's agreement as well in 2018. But that's very minor because a lot of those concessions are handled by the Canaries themselves. So it doesn't represent a major change in terms of Spectra's overall scope. And as I said, they work very much hand in hand when they're going out and making proposals or entertaining people that are looking to lease, particularly the convention center. That's where you really see that fluid partnership between the two of them, because one is really handling the leasing side of the facility, and the other has to be intimately involved on the food and beverage side of what's being provided in those proposals. Spectra as well is also similar to SMG, responsible on kind of a maintenance and a capital improvements need, but their areas are strictly for kind of the food and beverage items. So when you're talking about the kitchen at the convention center, which I think you all saw and how that was expanded, Spectra was highly involved in that and handling those capital improvements as they were rolled out. Unlike SMG, we do not pay Spectra a management fee. So how they're compensated for their duties is we share in the revenue that is generated as the result of food and beverage sales, whether that happens to be in the concessions at the event center or whether that is due to, say, the chamber meeting that happens at the convention center. All of those, we share a certain percentage of that, and a portion of that goes to the city, and a portion of it is kept by Spectra, and all of that is negotiated as part of their agreement, which we renewed back in 2018. Those funds then are run into the operating account, so they end up in the same operating account that SMG operates through, so they reconcile after every single event, and then the city's portion is handed over and kept by SMG within their operating account. So that's all within that net equity position that we talked about in regard to SMG. Very much like SMG, Spectra agreed to a major capital contribution as part of renegotiating their contract, and so they pledged $350,000 for capital and other improvements for the various portions of the food service areas. And so I think there's portions of that that haven't been incurred yet, but they're all been planned out for what they're doing, including like point of sale system upgrades and so forth. So we have several long-term, what I call long-term leases at the facility. The one that I wanted to identify in particular was the one with the Canaries, because there's a lot of discussions on the ballpark. It's been since the 1960s that this was built, and so I think there's a lot of questions on what the future purpose is, how long we'll continue to invest in the Canaries ballpark, and so I kind of wanted to walk through kind of what that particular agreement looks like, because this predates a lot of the development out at the event center. That original agreement was 20 years ago, so 1999 was when the original agreement was negotiated with what was then Canaries ball team. And that was a 20-year lease agreement they had for the ballpark out there. So they primarily take occupancy of that facility in April, and they have a lot of control over that facility up through October of each year. There's been some discussion on can we charge for parking out there, which is allowed. We can talk about whether parking would generate additional revenues out there, but there are some provisions in the Canaries agreement that we can't charge for parking related to their events, so that dates back to the decision that was negotiated 20 years ago. The other piece of it is in terms of the advertising. A lot of the advertising income that is generated within that stadium for the agreement relates back to the Canaries. So it can't necessarily be seen outside of the stadium, but everything you see on the back wall is handled by the Canaries themselves rather than through our management SMG. They also have actually some naming rights allowances for that facility that I don't know if have ever been executed by them, but there was some provisions for that, but that's never been something that's ever been moving forward. The club itself is responsible for the daily maintenance of the facility, so cleaning the offices, the storage spaces, making sure that all the spectator areas remain clean. So while they're occupying the facility, they are responsible for those duties as well as the maintenance of the field. Just like the other facilities, the city is responsible for making capital improvements to the site. So recently, we had approved, I think, about $350,000 approximately of improvements that had to be made. And we had a lot of discussions with the city council at the time because of concerns of investing those funds into the stadium, not knowing exactly where they were, what the long-term plan was going to be for the stadium. And I understand those concerns. Unfortunately, with the age of the stadium, there's a lot of potential life safety concerns that were, and some structural concerns that needed to get addressed. And because we have a 20-year lease agreement, we need to continue to fulfill our obligations for the city to maintain a facility that's usable, safe for the community to be utilizing. There's also some renewal options within this lease agreement that we also, I'm going to note here in a few seconds. So initially, the Canaries paid about $111,000 as part of their lease agreement. There was an amendment made to that lease agreement in 2009, so to change the way the lease payment was made, and it was dropped to $55,000 per year, and then there was a special add-on provision if they sold tickets over and above a certain amount. And that, I can tell you, I don't know from prior years, I could say last year's, I don't think that threshold was met because what we received was $55,000, what SMG received on the city's behalf was $55,000 from the Canaries ball field. The city also has kind of a spectator ticket fee that's set in ordinance that's collected for the city as well. And so it's a very minor amount. It's about 25 cents for tickets that are less than $12, 50 cents if they're greater than $12. We collect a similar fee for events that occur at the event center. It can be approximately $2 for those non-family events. So a lot of family events, it's not that amount, but if it's a non-family event, like a concert venue, then there's a $2 add-on charge that is included at that. It generates additional revenue for the city. If the Canary continue to maintain compliance with the full agreement, there are 2 5-year exercisable options for them to renew. The first one is for the 2020 through 2024. So we're currently in the last year of the Canary's first 20-year lease. But there is an option to renew at a base rent cost of $60,000 per year, and another 5 years beyond that, it's at $65,000 per year. And they would have to exercise that option, I think, by November of this year. Sheridan Hotel, that's located out at the convention center. So this was developed in conjunction when the convention center was originally built, about 20 years ago. So what happened at that time is J.Q. Hammonds entered into a 99-year ground lease with the city of Sioux Falls for the footprint of the actual hotel itself. So that lease was entered into in 1997. It was expanded somewhat in 2004 when they added on to the hotel, so that ground lease extended a little bit further. But we're still subject to clearly that 99-year ground lease that allowed them to be able to make the capital improvements that they needed to facilitate the hotel. That was all handled through a master development agreement that was also signed in conjunction with that back in 1997. The parking area itself is really owned and managed primarily by the city, so as part of our agreement with them, we would provide 175 parking spaces and continue to maintain that going into the future. Any other comments? Carrie, you probably have a lot more history with some of that with the Sheridan. Anything else you want to add?
Not right now.
And then the last one, just to mention too, is the Howard Wood Field. So clearly, the school district owns the field area, and that area kind of to the northwest of it, open areas there, but the parking areas around it are maintained and operated by the city. And we had a long-term perpetual lease agreement with, or easement with Howard Wood Field that would allow them to utilize and share use of the parking for their events. So that is what we were going to cover in regard to management really exciting stuff. So, any questions or comments in regard to that?
Does Spectra report to SMG or does Spectra report to the city, or how does that work?
SMG reports to SMG, but like Scott works very closely with some of their management staff out there in regard to the CIP planning, so that everybody's on the same page in terms of scheduling. But again, it's very smooth. It's been a good partnership out there.
Is that common practice?
You know, it was a point of discussion when we went through the RFP process and when we selected Spectra. There are a few facilities out there in the nation that do have separate companies, that one that manages and one that does F&B for the facility, and we contacted them, and they had really good luck with that process. But the way we structured the contract with one invoice to the customer and everything like that, the experience and the whole bit was, it's turned out really well. They really work well together. They complement each other. They push each other. So there's some really good synergies there by having two separate companies there. So so far it's been very successful for Sioux Falls.
Well, I can tell you the experience is seamless. Other than
It really
see
is.
the Spectra on some of the classes, instead of using it. And I like, they're both performance-based, they push each other. I mean, if you're not performing, then I'm not performing, it would be probably very good from the competition.
Yeah, and you can't tell, you know, when you talk to an SMG employee or Spectrum employee, again, they all work together so well that they're one team.
During the months of occupancy for the Canaries, the April through October, do they have exclusive rights to the stadium at that point, or are there other options available, assuming that they don't have something planned on a particular date?
I believe it's primarily exclusive, although I think we tried to work with them if something came up. Jim, I don't know if you want to comment a little bit more on that.
Yes, they have, we do have the option to let them know, give them notice that, hey, we want to look to do an event on this date, and as long as they don't have a home game or it's not already set aside or booked with somebody through them, we can hold the date back while we work on a special event.
Thank you.
Who would do the concessions under that scenario?
If we do the event, it would fall to, I'm not sure, I'd have to look that up to see if it would be.
Spectra doesn't.
It would be Spectra, but as far as if it would be under their agreement with the Canaries, or, no, it would be through us, right? Yeah.
If you promote it, I think it falls to you.
Yes, yeah, so it would fall under our Spectra agreement as opposed to the Canaries agreement.
The Spectra operating concessions for the Canaries during Canaries events.
Yes.
Okay. That's a separate.
Yes.
Shop point. Okay.
Yeah, Spectra actually did some work for the Howard Field at one time too.
Oh.
So they have the ability to go only so far out and do work, but on that campus they have worked in all those facilities.
So how does it work when you have the state amateur baseball tournament out there? Does SMG book that, or is that the Canaries sort of
I believe as a Canaries booked event. So again, then it would fall under those terms with Spectra.
Are the qualified incentive management fees, are those based on revenue, or is it value creation through net operational income?
Based on revenue. So there's a very specific, it's like I said, it's a 2-year look back period along with the budget is a percentage, and then there's a certain amount that when they go over what that average is, that big average becomes your baseline, and then how much you perform over that, there's a certain percentage that they're allowed.
And there's a ceiling on that.
There's a ceiling on it as well, yeah.
In these agreements, what kind of rights are there for Spectra and SMG if, hypothetically speaking, one of these facilities were to go? Are there certain penalties, options, triggers, or how does that work?
It's a good question. When the last review was done, particularly with SMG, so the last renewal, there is what I would call a go dark provision in relation to the Orpheum and I believe the arena, but not necessarily the ballpark, that if we were to close them or not cease utilizing them going forward, that there would be somewhat of a home harmless provision for SMG. Or at least the fees would be commensurately addressed.
Is the Hollywood Field agreement perpetual? Is that signed, just the agreement about parking?
I believe that's perpetual. I don't think there was a term, there was no termination on it, but there was no termination of that agreement, so. And it also allows access for utilization of, they have that operational facility out there with some parking, so for non-working hours, where buses can be parked and so forth, there's some allowance in there for that as well.
Sean, the Canary's lease, is there, what's the advance notice on the renewal options?
I believe it's November of this year that they have to give notice that they're looking to execute it. And that would, but they would have to ensure that they were in full compliance with the existing agreements as well.
Do you know who currently owns the Sheraton Hotel, and do they manage it themselves, or is it managed by a third party?
I don't know. Karen, do you know?
It's still within Hammonds
It's
Corporation.
still within their.
Does that lease provide them with any exclusivity in that area, the Sheraton?
I did not see any when I was reading through the lease that there was a provision for exclusivity. Now, there are some provisions, I believe in Spectra, I know there is an SMGs in terms of the exclusivity that they can't manage a similar type of facility within, I believe it might be 100 miles, something like that, Sioux Falls. So there is some that are benefiting the city in terms of exclusivity.
Does Spectrum manage the food and beverage operation within the Sheraton?
No. In fact, I think the Sheraton was the first manager of the convention center, correct? That was correct. So, that was for the first 10 years, maybe, is that right?
Pretty close, yeah.
Yeah.
It was almost 10 years.
Time flies when you're having
Time
fun.
flies. Do we have any sense for what the occupancy looks like at the Sheraton?
I do. It operates somewhere in the low to mid 60% last year, at about a $115 average daily rate, give or take.
And their occupancy is highly affected by what's going on in the Denny Sanford Premier Center complex. If it's empty, the occupancy goes down dramatically.
The feedback, I've had a couple of conversations with, Sheraton is now back into the Marriott family. They acquired Starwood about a year and a half ago, which long-term, I think will help the brand in general, drive business. Marriott's the industry leader in, the reservation platform. But I talked to the gal who oversees the South Dakota territory, and same type of thing. The Sheraton, because of its size, has a hard time driving occupancy and rate without events going on at the Premier Center complex, or how we do it.
What's the industry standard? What do you try to shoot for occupancy?
It's such a it's a complex question. It's with a full service, type of hotel and the overhead that type of facility has. They're stretching it at that. You would want to be in that low to mid 70% in occupancy, and probably, in that average daily rate of $125, $130. So, like I said, coming into, and those numbers were kind of mostly like 2018 type performance, but bringing it into Marriott, I think, will help incrementally. I don't think that it's going to just all of a sudden go to full, partially due to its size. Given the activity level out there, yes, it's sold out every time there's a big event or a big concert, but every time there's not an event going out there, that hotel should be probably 125 or 130 rooms instead of 240 or 243. So, yeah.
Terry, do you know, does the overflow then from the Sheraton on those busy weekends, does that go to the Ramada, or does that disperse throughout the city?
It's pretty much dispersed, but if there is something major going on at the complex, the Holiday Inn across Russell, and oftentimes Ramada will fill, and then, but people still, especially if they're from the western side, western half of South Dakota, will go toward the mall and fill. We're seeing a little shift in that, but it will go toward the mall and fill. Sioux Falls isn't so big that people are afraid to get a room anywhere in town, because they know they can get out to the Premier Center in 15 minutes.
Jerry, do the downtown hotels see a spike when there's big activity in the
Yes.
Premier Center?
Any other questions?
This would be just on the hotel front. Do you see people dispersed to the downtown area for events?
Yes.
For those
Yeah.
hotels?
Downtown is, you know, I mean, like, we'll just say it, downtown is where people want to be. They want to be able to walk. It's that walkability factor that we've all talked about before. And there are other see and do things downtown. They can eat easily, they can do, you know, they can walk, sculpture walk, they can go and shop, etc. And that's what people are looking for, is that experience that they can wrap around the main reason that they might be here, which might be a concert or a ball game or a convention.
So from your perspective in booking conventions and the groups that you're talking to, is a key factor for them location of hotel and proximity to the convention center, or does it not matter?
Absolutely. We lose business because we don't have enough rooms attached to the convention center at this time. And I'll talk about that more in depth when I review things with this group, but yes.
And Thomas Lee is here too from the Sports Authority, and that's something that we hear a lot from NCAA is they are always wanting more full-service hotels by the convention center, right, Thomas?
That's right. So the low occupancy that's at the Sheraton, or at least the lower of the where it should be, that's not because the Sheraton's failing. That's because it doesn't have a neighbor or two helping and propping it up. Terry's probably losing business because there isn't a second hotel there, because conventions are having to go 2 or 3 miles away. So some people stay at the Sheraton, some people stay 3 miles away, and they go somewhere else. If you had 2 or 3 hotels, I'm not saying that's the answer, but in this scenario, if you did have 2 or 3 hotels, Terry more than likely would book more business, which would put more business in of course, the Premier Center and the Convention Center.
So is the convention center big enough? When you're marketing even the convention center itself?
No.
Well, that was a quick answer.
One thing for the group to know too is, so like Terry, Mike, and Thomas are gonna present us next month with a lot of the same conversation we're having right now as far as, do we need to expand the convention center for Terry to book more events? Do we need more hotels out there? So we'll address a lot of these things next month too. So,
And
you guys are on the right track with your questions.
Yeah, and I'll get into a little bit of that in the campus study that was done too, and talk a little bit about where we're at with occupancy in the convention center, so.
Keep writing down your questions.
Yeah, great questions.
Anything else?
All right, we'll keep going. All right, we're gonna talk about the financials next. And then if you guys wanna do a break at some point, we'll do that. So this won't be quite as lengthy here. I will give a caveat here. So we're gonna talk a little bit about kind of performance of the different facilities out there, which are all under SMG's management. So SMG generates the financials for this as part of their management responsibilities. We will include the 2018 numbers right now. They haven't been fully audited. I think SMG is required to do an audit every year per their contract with the city, and they're in the process of completing that. So these are, I think, preliminary, I would say, end of year financials. And SMG is going to be doing kind of a press release, I think, in the near future that's going to talk a lot about their performance. But it's broader than just how much revenue was generated, but more so talking about what kind of attendance was generated, what kind of milestones were met in the following year. But I went back to the original CSL agreement that was done by CSL back in February 2015 to kind of see what they had projected in going to develop this event center, what it would actually generate for revenues. So when that study was done, it had projected revenues for the Premier Center to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.3 million to 2.9 million. And what you'll see in the next slide here coming up is our actual net events revenues. So once you take away the cost, direct cost of those events, our total average revenue was 5.15 million over the last 3 years. Very consistent, as you'll kind of see going backwards here. And then in terms of projected expenditures, they had projected expenditures of 2.2 million to 2.4 million. Our actual expenditures were 3.1 million on average over the last 3 years. So a little bit, very conservative on the revenue projections, but also very conservative a little bit, or light on the expenditure projections. But you also have to understand, the more events that we're booking, the more activities that are occurring, the more expenses we're going to occur to. So you are going to see expenses going up as revenues go up as well. So, but overall, from a profitability standpoint, or in terms of excess revenue for the operational side, it is performed better than it had originally anticipated. That's fair to say. So this is going to be a little hard to read. I apologize, but hopefully in your handout you can kind of see in terms of where our performance had been. So 2014, that was just a partial year as the event center was just opening and getting up to operating. So really not a good indicator of a full year's performance. But 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, what you're seeing there is really solid and sustained revenues for the facility. So I think you always have some concerns that you get beyond that first honeymoon period, where it's that new facility that everybody wants to go see, and then you start seeing revenues drop. So we're in year 6 now, eventually, of that facility, and 2018 was just as strong, if not a stronger year than it has been in any of the past for the event center. So overall, they had net operating income of $2.1 million, which is pretty much right in line with their average over the last 3 years. If you look, and I don't want to get in the nuts and bolts of the financials too much, but I do want to kind of highlight a little bit on what revenue sources are there for the Premier Center and how those all factor out. So clearly you have the rental revenues, which is going to include some of those longer term lease tenants that we have in the Storm and the Stampede, but other rentals of the facility itself. And again, these are just strictly for the event center is what we're talking about right now, the Premier Center, not Convention Center or anything else. But in terms of other sources of income, so charges for operating labor for events that are going on there, guest servicing, there's a lot of miscellaneous income, and then advertising is included, I believe, with that service income as well. Ancillary income would include your food and beverage services, so that's where that net of Spectra is coming in terms of the income that they're generating. Ticket incentives and facility fees would be coming into that. And then the last piece is that marketing and sponsorship revenue, which you can see really plays a significant part in the total revenue between the title sponsorships and the other naming rights sponsorships that we have within the arena, and the continual other sponsorships that are regularly being offered and renewed. I mean, we're kind of in that process now where a lot of the previous agreements are in the process of being renewed. So S&G's abilities to handle those sponsorships and generate revenue has been a huge asset for this facility because of the 9.9 million, over a third or almost a third of that is generated by those sponsorship agreements.
Do you have a long-range plan of any significant sponsorships that drop off at some time?
Those are continually being assessed by SMG, so they're looking through those. They basically have an inventory of what can be sold or what's left to be sold. And so they'll go through that, and I believe they even had brought a consultant in to kind of identify areas that they could be sponsorship opportunities. So we don't want it to become a NASCAR operation out there where you're seeing signs everywhere, but I think most people would say, you want to take advantage of opportunities.
Oh, we love NASCAR.
Right, nothing against NASCAR, but we want to take advantage of opportunities where they exist, making sure that it still, retains its the same ambiance or that it has currently, aesthetically pleasing kind of look. And so I think they've kind of done a nice job of balancing that. And I'll give it to Jim, or if you want to make any more comments in regard to the sponsorships and the facilities that you've had.
We did enlist the services of a national consulting firm that has worked with several of our accounts around the country. And suggestion on pricing, different things like that, and where we need to get to. When the building first opened, we were historically a little low, but again, it was a new market and you're gauging, there's a feeling out process. So we're currently looking at, renewals and stuff like that, as far as to try to get to that where that consulting company thinks we should be. So, without selling, sponsorships on the back of our usher staff, but again, to not NASCAR it up, so.
New patches on the uniform.
Yeah, I'd like to, but.
And then just again, looking at the overall piece there, the consistent revenue has been generated over the last 3 years, and when SMG issues their press release, and I think SMG will probably be presenting at the next events study group, and they'll talk a little bit more about kind of attendance and how that has occurred over time and the number of events booked. In terms of the other facilities, so the Sioux Falls Arena is tracked separately, and you can kind of see from this piece, let's just say the overarching piece, the success of the Premier Center helps to absorb our less than successful pieces, components of the Premier Center campus, and clearly the arena itself has been one that hasn't had positive cash flows. It's been one that has been a user of resources, let's say, overall in terms of its ability. So I know as part of this group, you're going to be looking at future purposes of this facility. I mean, it has served the community well for the last 60 years. But what additional ways do we utilize this facility going forward, or is there a different mindset at how it's to be used? But overall, based on how they allocate revenues and expenditures, this one's running about negative. Last year was about negative $570,000 approximately. So there isn't as many opportunities to book events in here anymore. Part of that is due to the fact that we have the event center and people are going to prefer the larger facility. There's other competition out there for similar types of space that we currently are able to offer there. And it's an aging facility that just isn't aesthetically the type of facility that often people are looking to book. So that it will require major investments in any regard to kind of bring it into, to elevate its revenue potential.
Sean, since we met last, Augie announced they're moving out. What does this look like in the whole? August now. Have we looked at that?
2025.
Don't know for sure. I want to say revenue
It was
for an
25.
August season was it 25?
It was 25 a year, and then we had a small cut of the concessions, but
So
it
it's
wasn't a
not-
huge revenue driver.
Yeah, it was just twofold. It was a lot of dates. Sorry to see them go and lose those dates. However, it now opens up more dates in the calendar to tie in convention center, trade show events, and put some merchandise in there.
It's primarily used for flat floor space as an extension of the convention center.
And when you utilize it for that, I believe you allocate some of the revenues from those rentals to the arena, then, correct?
Yes.
That because you're using the flat floor space, and they get allocated that revenue, a portion of that revenue if they're utilizing all three facilities. As far as the convention center, it also had negative net operating income over the last couple of years, specifically in 2017, and I think part of that is driven by maybe the kitchen remodel, is fair to say, when that was being redone. But again, it improved last year, but still operating negative, about $120,000 based on the way they're allocating the revenues and the expenses for that particular piece. And that kind of gets to, and this will lead into Scott's discussions in terms of continuing investing into this facility. Clearly, we know this is an asset for the community, so we're trying to do more than we're trying to attract people to the community and get people to utilize our restaurants and lodging and so forth. But certainly from our perspective, we hope to see this get back to break even or being net positive again in the long run.
Compared to other communities with convention center this size, in a community this size, do any of them break even? I mean, I think that's pretty rare in the convention world to have a facility breaks even, isn't it?
It can be, it depends, we're kind of in a unique situation because it's paired with several other facilities here, but I guess S&G is probably in a better position to discuss that since they manage a lot of different facilities. across the country. If they have any comments on that?
It's the similar size market is the question.
That's, yeah, and we could certainly pull some research for that. I mean, we manage the Philadelphia Convention Center, obviously Philly's a lot bigger. I mean, so we'd have to pull some more data as far as similar size markets, if we manage convention centers and then, go out and do that. And there are so many extra, components to that. Is there arena, close hotel proximity, what they can draw and stuff like that. So it's not a true apples to apples comparison. There's always going to be some variables that you're going to have to take into account. On
In
that.
general though, do convention facilities stand alone? Do they make money or do they not?
I would say no.
So we're actually doing pretty good to not be down very much.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with our market too. I mean, have probably the largest facility in the area too, so again, we're kind of captive. And so we do well that way, I guess, and I think we do a good job investing in the facility too. So it's a nice facility, and I think people recognize that.
Yeah, from somebody coming just obviously with fresh eyes coming in the community, I was telling some people the other day, for what we have for this market, it's fantastic. For the amenities in the Premier Center and the Convention Center, I've been in a lot of different markets around the country, and you have something special here. You do have something special as far as the amenities and the way it's kept up, everything like that. And it is nice where, Minneapolis is 3.5 hours away, and you're on a little bit of an island here, which is good because it routes shows better and different things like that, and it attracts people from a regional. There's not a lot of close competition, which is good. But I'll reserve my future comments for later in the presentation.
You mentioned a community asset. Maybe for all of these, is it possible, maybe Terry's going to expand on this more, but is it possible to see the overall economic impact, including hotels and sales taxes for each one of these facilities broken down, so we can kind of look at this more globally?
It's something that we've talked about. I don't know if that's something, I know that CDB talks a lot and tracks some of those numbers, so.
We have the overall economic impact for the community. We'd have to go to the building to get, each one and how it translates into economic impact.
But Tom, you bring up a good point. I mean, really the purpose of these buildings is not necessarily to make a profit. We also don't want them to bleed money, but it's a facility to create a lot of jobs and bring a lot of economic impact into the community through lodging and sales tax and food and beverage. So we make up for that deficit in all of those other ancillary sales tax revenues.
Well, it's a quality of life issue too, especially the workforce.
Yeah.
Yep.
Situation. We have to be mindful of that and I think Tom makes a good point, look at it globally and how it impacts beyond just, you have to bet there or don't.
And then last one we'll take a look at here is just the baseball stadium. So as I noted, prior to 2018, this was really handled in-house by the City of Sioux Falls Parks and Rec Department. So we haven't been able to break it out here. So this is just the financials from 2018. And you can kind of see it's showing a net operating deficit of about $234,000. And part of that is allocating some overhead expenses from SMG and so forth that because it's now part of their portfolio, they get allocated part of that overhead as well. But you can see it is something like many of the assets where we have to continue to invest in it, and it's not a net positive generator of income for the city.
Is it possible to see the trends on this from previous?
I don't know if we're able to break that out of the Park and Rec.
We don't have a very good ability to track all of that within Parks and Rec. It's in the larger scale of things, but when we look back at as much as we could piece together, you would probably find the numbers pretty similar.
And does this also compare kind of with neighbors and similar communities?
Couldn't answer that.
Well, I think you look back at that CSL study, and they'll tell you that a lot of our neighbors have a lot newer facilities, so they're doing a little better as far as attendance wise. Again, it's that, and then it's one of those things that I'll cover later on in the presentation here. But again, age of the facility and amenities for the fans is again lacking, and so I think that maybe slows the numbers down a little bit.
Hey, Scott, is the operating expense number for the Canaries, is that net of what their portion is? Because I know it indicated they're responsible for a handful of things, or is that a gross
So that-
number and there's a reimbursement component?
It doesn't include any of their expenses because they're a private entity, and so they'll run all their things through their own financial statements. So this is just strictly the income that we receive from leasing the facility, so the $55,000 that we receive in lease income, and then some ancillary income, which is a very small portion, like $2,500 of that is actually food net that we've received, and the rest, I think, would probably be some ticketing fees and some of the other miscellaneous charges, so. Anything else, I think, Deb, you want to add to that?
And just to keep perspective on these financials, they don't include capital improvements that are needed.
They include no capital improvements.
Okay, so if
Or
those
major
were,
repair and maintenance.
Okay.
The city does both capital improvements and major repair and maintenance.
so if those were taken into account, then we would get even more skewed.
Correct. I mean, if we just put $350,000 into this for this year, and add that already to what's already been invested into it.
Is there really operating basis, just the operating component?
I had a question, because it was in the study, and it's not the focus of the Premier Center campus, but the Orpheum, there's a couple pages regarding the Orpheum. It mentions that the Orpheum has 30,000 in annual average attendance over the period they studied, but it only generates between 118,000 and 133,000 in revenue. I'm not a regular attendee of the Orpheum, but that's about $4 per person. Is that kind of how that operation works with the productions and so on?
Yeah, and we're currently looking at the utilization of the Orpheum and, ways that could be expanded separate from this particular study. So we've had some separate conversations in regard to the Orpheum.
And to his question, were those numbers showing up in the financials in this package? Are they locked together with?
No, they're not, none of those, so I broke those all out. I didn't include those just because it's not part of the event center campus at all, kind of not directly
So it's not
relevant.
skewing it.
No, it doesn't impact these numbers at all. Only to the extent that, if the Orpheum transition management, that some of those overhead costs may shift back a little bit, and we recognize that because you're spreading those fixed overhead costs over less facilities.
And then overhead is essentially 2 employees.
That, but you also have your general overhead that you split, and you make the best distribution of allocations of those resources, but you have central staff, you have managers, you have bookkeeping staff, all of that accountants that get spread amongst all of the facilities. You estimate where their time is, and you allocate that, and that's what SMG does, but you do it to the best of your ability, but you don't necessarily track every moment you spend at which facility.
Any other questions before we take a quick break? If not, I think we'll take 5 minutes. I think the restrooms are around to the right.
A lot of the powers that be in this town.
C'est la vie, I mean,
That's right.
Well, it's good to see you.
Yeah, have fun.
I think we'll get going again, just to respect everybody's time. Next up on the agenda is the entertainment tax fund. Who's going to cover that one?
I'll cover that one. Give just kind of a brief snapshot on the entertainment tax fund itself. And this is the fund that initially, the tax was enacted in 1992 to bring the entertainment tax in. We'll cover a little bit about what it all covers, but 93 then borrowed the money to build the convention center and the Washington Pavilion, or the build out of the Washington Pavilion. Convention Center opened in 97. The Pavilion opened in 1999, and the debt for those facilities that the money was borrowed for that, which was repaid by both the sales tax and the entertainment tax. Both funds participated in payment, was paid off in 2014. So, and not too soon, because at about that stage, and Scott will go into it in more detail, you're starting to run into the age of those facilities, and the need to keep up with, larger repair and maintenance items, capital improvements, upgrades, replacements. And so the entertainment tax fund is really set aside for those purposes, and then to provide some operating support as needed. The fund itself, it's the third penny tax that's on lodging accommodations, on dining out, which would include takeout as well, alcoholic beverage sales, and ticketed events, tickets to, different things of amusement. Most of these facilities will all collect the ticket tax part of that as well. So, in addition to the entertainment tax, then there's facility revenues that are part of the fund. We don't necessarily drag those back into the city's financials. They're held on our behalf, as Sean covered earlier, in the S&G operating account, which is at the end of the day the city's account. But that's really held for future investments and also to weather any economic ups and downs as you look forward to provide some of that cash flow needs. As Sean said, we're now into year 5, going into year 6, and we've had very good years. So the key is to be prepared if things don't go just as planned. And that's the way we do all of our funds here at the city, and the entertainment tax fund is no different. We don't want to go back for more resources. We want to make sure that these accounts have the necessary resources to take care of themselves going forward. The uses for the tax then, for civic facilities is what it's set up for. City uses it for the Washington Pavilion, the events complex, which includes all the entire complex, the Orpheum Theater, and the zoo was added in a while back, and we do have a little bit of funding that goes to the zoo, submitted in a couple years ago. Again, set aside for capital improvements, the major repair and maintenance. The entities will take care of the minor day-to-day repair and maintenance that are more operating in nature. They're responsible for that component, but the city comes in and takes care of major repair and maintenance. We're going to replace the carpets or roof replacements, windows, doors, cover through all that. And as well to provide operating support, primarily goes to the Washington Pavilion. We do budget for operating support for the stadium and the Orpheum Theater, but that gets washed through on the overall events complex that has positive income. So we actually don't pay any money out of the tax to that. It just offsets how much is being held in the city's operating, the SMG operating account held on behalf of the city. Taking a real quick look at the third penny sales tax. One of the things that we try to watch on the third penny is that it's what we would term more of a discretionary income tax based on what it is taxed on. And so it's a little more volatile than we'll see on our broad-based sales tax. So we do tend to be a little bit more cautious when we look at the entertainment tax because of that, the ups and downs. The last year, you'll see in 2018 was actually a return of 7.8%, but that had some audits. Some entity was misreporting entertainment tax as lodging tax, and so the state corrected that. We got that, finally got that straightened out. I think we're finally on clear. And so, but on without audits, the return would be about 4% for 18. When we normalize for those audits, about a 3.5% ongoing return, which if you look over time since the taxes started, about a 5.6% return year over year. But again, can't count on that every year. We try to watch and make sure we see what's coming at us from an economic perspective and plan accordingly.
What happened to 04?
Well, some of those things is you don't know about the timing of some of the tax collections and when they're coming through, and whether it's kind of like in 18, we have a spike in 18, but it's, if you look at a normalized basis, it's not quite as big of a spike. Yeah, I don't have anything specific on 04 other than if you look at 03 and you look at the both sides of it, down a little bit more, probably not quite that high with some timing things, but it was substantially higher. I don't know, I didn't go back and run that one down, just have to take a look at our sales tax. Didn't really provide a long history here because the 2019 budget is pretty indicative of how the entertainment tax rolls year over year. Again, it's, right now, if you look at our financial statements, you'll see a fund balance of about $12.9 million, but we'll quickly show how that money is allocated out. Sean covered earlier that that $3.7 million is held on behalf of the city by SMG, so that comes off. So if you really look at an available fund balance, we'd be at about $9.2 million in balance. So if you look at, we're planning on about $7.9 million in revenue in 2019, primarily from the entertainment tax. You get a small part of interest, but it's primarily the tax. From that, then, we provide operating support. So the total budgeted operating support of $2.8 million across all entities. Most of that, again, is to the Washington Pavilion. There's a substantial part of that, but then the Orpheum Theater and Stadium are also, in the zoo are also part of it. Repair and maintenance of $2.7 million, which again, as these facilities, and one thing we can think about as well on the capital side is the event center is a large facility. When things go wrong, things really go wrong, and the dollars add up very quickly. And so we don't always spend every dollar of the repair and maintenance account, but we need to be prepared for those because we have run into some issues that Scott will cover them that, you have a chiller go down, or you have something that we've got to have back up and running on a fairly quick order. And so we're prepared to handle those repair and maintenance costs, as well as then the capital improvements, facility upgrades, replacements. That's both on the facility side and the equipment side. That $7.2 million in capital investments, $3.2 million of that was carried forward from the prior years. So projects ebb and flow over time, and so those balances will sometimes build up as we're working on big projects and getting them bid out, and then they'll complete out. So years can look a little bit up and down from a capital investment standpoint as we complete the actual improvements themselves. So when you take all those into account, you'll see a net change in fund balance of down 4.8 is what we had used. Again, a large part of that being those capital investments that are carried forward. Last year we added to fund balance. If we get those improvements done, we'll subtract from it this year. And ending with an available fund balance of $4.4 million. And again, we try to make sure that we look well ahead in this fund for those capital improvements that are coming down the road on these facilities. And we're now in the capital program, our 5-year capital program. We'll have the 10th year that the event center is open, the 10th and 11th year. Well, then you're talking the need to start replacing some major items. Scott's going to cover those, and those costs add up. So the money just doesn't sit around long term. We will build balances up to make sure that we can maintain going forward.
So it must have been a calculated decision to then spend down the fund in the budget this year?
Correct. We're always looking out ahead, and there will be years when you're adding to fund balance, and then years you're going to take fund balance out.
Okay.
And most of that is due to the capital improvements. When those capital improvements come rolling through, we know one of the biggest things coming at us, and Scott will cover, will be those ribbon boards. And when those get replaced, those are not just a couple $100,000, we're talking millions of dollars. And so we're preparing for those. We plan those out. And so, and just like we do in our other funds, you build balances up at times and then you draw them down based on, when we open a fire station or anything else. And same is true here.
A couple of questions. Thank you for your presentation. So first one is pretty simple. How far out do you look on doing planning for capital investments? And secondly, and maybe this is more difficult with the variety of facilities that you're overseeing, there must be some industry standard that says, of all this, some percentage should be in reserve in case, and as you know, we have weather events here at times. And do you have a number for that, and where are we in relation to that? Do you use a percentage of something?
We don't use a percentage specifically. We will look at it, our capital investments. We're gonna retain a a fairly solid operating balance because of the fluctuation in the entertainment tax itself. But we don't have a set policy as to the percentage that we will keep in the fund. But we look out, we've started to look out now with the events, with the Career Center on board, at least 20 years, as to what are those big things that will have to be replaced. Things have life cycles, 5, 10, 15, 20, even 25 and beyond. So I think we're actually out almost 25 years on some of those. And we use our managers to help us look at their other facilities and what happens when your facility hits what happens when it hits 15 and 20. And so we're asking those questions. And we can plan for a lot of things, carpet replacement and interior finishes and some of that stuff. You kind of know it. But what's the life cycle of some of those big operating equipment, the HVAC systems, the networks, those ribbon boards, technology. So the last thing I really had to cover was one of the things that comes up from time to time is the debt service on the event center that is being repaid by the sales tax fund. And you can see, I didn't put a chart on here if the entertainment tax fund was trying to pay that back because the debt service at 8 to 9 million would take all the entertainment tax right off the bat. So we would not be able to invest in keeping these facilities up. And that's part of the thing that we recognized with the last time we did this was, once we didn't get those bonds repaid any too soon, as we had items that needed to be addressed from a capital investment standpoint and a repair and maintenance standpoint. So that's how we look at the fund, just like you would in your businesses and even your home budget. Is how do you prepare and look ahead to make sure that you don't get caught off guard with those future improvements.
And just to add to that, Tom and I were even talking this morning, but it's been kind of philosophical for the city to, like you said, keep the debt service payments reasonable, but also keep the timeline in which we're repaying that debt reasonable. I mean, if you look overall at the debt capacity of the city, it's fairly significant, and we're always well below what our maximum are. We probably, we would never want to even achieve close to what the maximum is, but there's certainly, we've always kept a lot of capacity for the city because we've been trying to keep our debt limited in terms of scope for how long it goes, but also we've always taken a lot of opportunities to pay down debt over time too, if there are advantages or opportunities to do so.
Yeah, we don't extend the term. These were 22-year bonds for a facility, for a $115 million facility. I'm not sure how many would take it on in a 20-year time frame, but the city has 22 years on the repayment schedule on this, so it's a fairly quick repayment schedule. It allows you to look ahead. So
there are many communities that would have done a 30-year plus bond for something of this nature, because they would view it as a 30-year plus facility. But as you said, you hit the 20 years, and we see this with the pavilion and others. Once you hit that critical time point, that's when your maintenance costs start going up, and we need to have funds available to pay for that we don't have to follow up to do.
yeah, it's just part of the fiscal responsibility that this community has overall. It reflects what Sioux Falls is.
So one question, so I see on here the revised budget gets $7.2 million in capital investment. What is the policy in terms of certain CapEx items that'll come up? I mean, is part of this essentially going toward it and you finance some of the capital improvements, or that?
They're not financed.
They're not financed at all.
This is
Okay,
all cash.
thank you.
It's all cash. Yep. And it's all about that 20-year outlook time frame of, okay, what do we expect is going to happen? In fact, just sat down with S&G like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and said, okay, we're always really re-looking at those numbers to say, okay, is this still a priority for this year, or does it move down here? What gets added for this year that becomes a priority? Because it's always changing. But what S&G, the benefit of having S&G as a management agent too, is that they manage so many other facilities. They can take that knowledge and help us plan out for that 20 years. I mean, they took US Bank Stadium and said, here's what their plan was for their long-term outlook. Now, how does that relate to ours? Now, we're not at that scope and scale, but we have some of the same issues. We have electronic signs, we have ribbon boards, we have things that will exceed useful life on a shorter term basis and what many people expect them to. We need to plan ahead for them, and we don't plan to borrow to replace them. So we need to be able to have the cash available at the time.
Thank you for clarifying.
And that's part of the flexibility we try to keep in the fund, is to make sure we do have some flexibility for things that do come up from time to time, for, you know, hopefully for new opportunities eventually, but, you know, it's trying to maintain that flexibility. And we just don't plan to, we borrowed for construction of it, we are not planning to finance any of the ongoing repair and maintenance and capital upgrades. That's part of what the entertainment tax fund is set aside to do.
One of the things that can easily happen is you can get into a break-fix mode, where you kind of fall behind and the priority becomes whatever broke yesterday has to be fixed today, that sort of a thing. It really sounds like you've got a great handle on looking forward and planning and having adequate revenue to handle these things. But then I think about it, please understand this is not a critical comment, but I look at the arena and note that the arena has gotten tired. Have we not had enough capital dollars to kind of keep that facility, or what really has happened is that the arena seems to have fallen behind a bit. And I know some of it would require remodeling and that sort of thing, as opposed to just fixing and repairing and facelifting. But I guess my question is, do we have enough money to meet our capital appetite for the facilities that we're taking care of?
I do believe that we have the necessary capital resources to take care of what we have. The question would be more or less is, what's the future of that before we start investing money in? We did have money in the capital plan for the arena a while back, and even up to just a couple of years ago. The question was, we really didn't have a plan yet for what did that look like going forward, and it's part of what this group is here to help with. And that, it's all, you know, part of that money that's dropping to the bottom line, you know, is part of that, to say what is, you know, if we do need to go, and it is going to stay, we are going to have to put some money into it, just like the stadium and other things, and we want to be prepared to do that. And as you can see by those balances, we are. And those balances, you know, will improve over time as we run out some of these major capital items that Scott's going to cover that we're doing right now. And then it's preparing for that next wave of investments. So we're kind of coming into that period where the balance is down a little bit, but it's now getting ready for the next.
At break, we talked just briefly about, you know, in my past experience, I would be lobbying for that roof repair or replacement, or some major capital expense in a building that is preventative rather than break fix. Sitting right next to me would be someone arguing that the MRI machine needed to be replaced. And I'm wondering how, I mean, are these dollars that we're talking about for capital, are they set aside so that they're at the discretion of the people who have to manage these buildings? And I realize overall there's always give and take in the budgeting process and who gets the capital dollars, but are we comfortable that these capital dollars available for these repairs and these projected replacements are going to be there for us? That's probably my question.
I think they are. I think it's a really good balancing act amongst all the operators of all these buildings that we do have that share in this tax. It is a give and take, and we do take a look at before we get to that break fix mode. And I'll cover that. We were in that point, at that point with the convention center, and you'll see that list here. But again, it came that we had to make this big bond payment to pay off the bonds for the convention center and the pavilion. So we had some really tough decisions to make, and we had a lot of deferred maintenance, and we're really starting to come off of that now. And you'll see that because the list is really long. But again, I think we do. I really do. Again, everybody works well together, and we understand what everybody's needs are, and we have a good handle on our buildings. We know how they operate now and what their needs are on an annual basis.
We keep a close pulse on things with our facility managers. We're meeting with them regularly. Scott is out there regularly. Sean is meeting with them. So we have a really good pulse of what they're seeing coming at us and what we're hearing. And as Scott was alluding to, we've marked up that hill and taken care of a couple of facilities. We still have a few things left to do, but a couple of the facilities that had aged on us. And I believe as you look at the tax going forward and as we looked out long term, the tax is set up well to take care of what we have. And as we look to make investments going forward, that's something that we have to weigh against is making sure that we first take care of these facilities. And we first, like you said, have the capital dollars available to take care of what we see coming at us. And that's part of that planning that we do with SMG and the Washington area on a regular basis.
And one of my focuses is to really work with the operators of these buildings to set up good preventive maintenance programs, so we get, you know, the max life out of these chillers and these boilers and all these, you know, HVAC systems that cost us, you know, thousands if not millions of dollars to replace. So again, I think we're in a really good point with these guys, and we have a good understanding that we identify these problems before they become big problems, and so we're not replacing equipment or systems that before they're end of life. So again, we buy good quality equipment to begin with, and we try and maintain it to its full extent of its life. So.
Say real quick, if I could, can we bring SMG in on that conversation? You guys, I believe that you concur with them that the city's doing a good job at that, but would you know, based on your experience elsewhere, are we doing a good job of making those capital improvements when they need to be made, as well as planning out far enough into the future?
Yeah, I mean, what I've seen, yes. I mean, we have a preventive maintenance program company-wide through Altum that's obviously keeps us on track to make sure that every step, whether it's chillers or roof or an electrical and everything like that, is being taken care of. And we plug that into a system, and believe me, we have corporate people that are always make sure you get your stuff in there, because we want to be good stewards and maintain. We're charged with maintaining the facility to the best of our abilities. The stuff breaks randomly. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. That's just the nature of things. But we're doing our best to make sure that everything is documented, that we're taking care of it, because we are in charge of, you know, that for our client. And so I think we are doing a very good job with that. And they are doing a good job. I was in on that meeting, and we're talking about, you know, 5 years and beyond as far as setting money aside and what do you think about this? What do you think about that? They're on the leading edge, because I've had other clients that don't look out as far. The building I was just in, that they don't have those meetings with us yet. Now it's the same age facility that I was just at. So
I would just make one more point going back to your question too, Orland, that the arena, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of deferred maintenance issues, I think have to do a lot with aesthetics and function as opposed to structural. And I think from a structural standpoint, it's been overall, that thing, it's been well maintained. The HVA systems are still very good in it, but aesthetically and functionally, there would be major investments that would have to go into it. And that kind of bears out why this group is meeting, because why should we invest in $3 million in new bleachers if the future function of this facility is no longer going to be in parallel to what it is currently?
You had mentioned earlier about the Canaries, the baseball diamond, that the grounds and stuff is taken care of by the Canaries. But you had mentioned structural issues that are going on there. And I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question or not, but in my research, I have learned that the baseball diamond itself, the field, the back 40, whatever, I don't play baseball, so, but anyway, back in the back, is in really, really, really bad shape. And it's in such bad shape that it's known throughout the leagues. We're known for that. And so when people come here, they don't give it their all. And the thing that has been said is, have you ever noticed that the Canaries don't really win at home because they aren't giving it their all either. And so I just wondered, is this a part of anything that we're looking at or considering as far as, you know, what, I mean, because that hurts us overall as a community when that's part of our reputation.
I can't speak to whether they play hard or not based on the
That's what they've said.
But, you know, they're responsible for regular maintenance, but that's cleaning, things like that, making sure that there's a certain degree to that. But, you know, both the arena and the Canaries ball field are about the same age. But one is continually open to the outside elements. And so, whereas the arena has retained itself because of the type of structure it is, the Canaries ball field has not. I mean, it's been open to the elements for a long time, and it was redone probably what?
In the 90s, it was in like around 92, they did a remodel of it, and yeah, you know, I know what you're speaking of. Out in the outfield, there's a retaining wall out there that is gonna get replaced this year, that is, you know, Leaning Tower of Pisa out there in left field. Yeah, it's gonna get replaced. There are some issues with that facility, and they're being addressed, but that's why we're only addressing life safety type issues, ADA issues, concrete, waterproofing, caulking, holes, you know, things that don't add to fan experience, but again, that's just taking care of the facility. And so there's some deferred maintenance there that's gonna get addressed.
Okay. I'm specifically talking about the ground itself. Like,
Yeah, again, they maintain the grounds out there. I'm not aware of any of the issues there.
I think when we get to the next item on our agenda,
Sorry.
no, it's totally fine. We're gonna talk about kind of compartmentalizing some of these different facilities and put some groups together so that we can dig into that level of detail on each one. And it might come where we understand we need some more input from the Canaries or what's going on with the field, and help us identify some of the additional resources we're gonna need as we move forward. Great question.
Any other questions?
You ready, Scott?
All right, let's talk about capital investments. This is basically how we're going to keep our facilities relevant. So how do we decide what's going to get done and where is it going to get done and how much? Well, we do source a few local firms here to help us with a facility study that it's basically a 360 look at our buildings. We do it every 5 years. And it's mainly focused on looking at all the major building facility systems. And it's basically like a home inspection for a big public civic facility. So what we focus on is prioritizing projects over the next 5 years, and then this report comes with a budget. It really assists us with budgeting what we need to focus on as far as finding the dollars it takes to replace those types of systems. So, again, this study doesn't happen with just those folks. It also happens with a lot of collaboration from SMG and the city, and we work with them and we dial in some of those projects. We may pull a couple ahead, to find some efficiencies, but we also talk about R&M. It's not just, it's strictly focused on capital improvements. It's the R&M budget and deciding how many dollars do we need to have in that R&M budget every year. So for example, the Denty, you gotta have $100,000, you gotta have 6 figures in there for, especially HVAC improvements. We say, well, why would you need that, for a new facility? Well, I'll tell you that we have had $3 parts fail on us that cost us $90,000 to repair. So again, there are those types of systems in those buildings that you have those types of problems with. So again, we focus on historical averages, and we come up with a dollar amount that we feel is necessary to meet the needs. And again, it's all about keeping that facility relevant, keeping it looking like new, and making sure that the client is happy with what they see when we rent that space out. So, investments that we've made over the last 5 years, you'll notice that the convention center is a pretty long list. And there is a reason behind that. I touched on it earlier. We were paying the bonds off on the pavilion. We did not have a lot of money to do some of the major investments in that facility. That facility has now reached its 20 years of age. There are a lot of systems in that building that we were at that OT, that break fix point. It was not fun. I mean, we buckets are on the floor, leaky roof, all those types of things, but we have I think turned the corner. We've replaced roofing systems, the EFIS, which is the siding on the outside of the building. The curtain wall window was a major investment. It was leaking so bad. We've had, you know, some issues there, and we got that fixed. Interior doors, bathroom remodels. You know, again, a lot of those things that you see in here were necessary and had not been touched since the facility had been built. They've been maintained pretty well. However, again, there was a lot of value engineering that went into this building to really get that bond to pass and to get that dollar amount where it needed to be. And again, they did what they did, and we ended up with some shorter lives. We didn't get a 30-year roof on the building. We ended up getting a 15-year roof. You know, so those are things that we had to work through, and some decisions that had to be made at the time when they built the facility. However, when you look at where we're at now, we're starting to turn the page, and now we're focused on, now we've gotten some remodels done, we're updating some signage, we're updating some nice fan amenities. You know, the kitchen and concession equipment is probably the biggest revenue generating piece of money that we spent in this facility, and that'll pay dividends for quite a few years actually. Updating the, again, Terry will appreciate this, the silver plates, you know, and for the, you know, people don't realize that, but we had some of the same plates we've been using for 20 years, you know, the glasses and the silverware. So those are things that you never think about, but it's an expense that the city pays for. Again, security systems, you know, everybody knows the day and the age that we're in. We now have a much more robust security system in the facility. Fire alarm systems needed to be upgraded. Again, life safety needed to get ahead of that. And then we've made numerous HVAC improvements in the facility. We have one going on right now. Again, it's all about client comfort and those types of things that we've invested in there. Again, it seems like a lot. I will tell you, the management staff at the convention center has gone through enough construction fatigue in the last 4 years that they're kind of done with it. But we still have more to do, and we're going to continue to invest. Again, it's about keeping the facility relevant. I'm going to say that quite a bit because, again, you see facilities that make money, it's because you keep them relevant. And one of the things that you know, we talk with the salespeople, we get their feedback. It's me meeting with that team in an effort to find out what those needs are, and that's how we budget that stuff. So there's a lot of communication going on between the manager to help us decide what we need to get done and when we need to do it. The event center. Again, we have not done a lot on that facility because it is a new facility, but there were some things that we moved on. We moved on and got done. Cooler expansion. Many people don't know where this room is, but we added a room onto the building. You know, we go through a lot of adult beverages in that facility, and there is a huge issue there with staff having to move coolers up and down 2 different flights of steps or up to the concourse level. So we added a cooler expansion there. Again, security system improvements. Everybody, you know, they get that. Electrical distribution equipment. We're using the facility differently than what we once thought. Again, so we're providing more shows in there, so we needed more equipment there. And then obviously, you know, time is money when it comes to loading in and loading out a show. We've made some investments in material handling equipment in that facility. Getting to the arena, you know, again, the question's been asked, you know, why haven't we spent a lot of money there? Well, again, I think we're preparing for what is the arena going to evolve into? What are we going to do? We make those investments in there. You know, we haven't made a lot of investments in that facility, but we've updated the chiller. We're going to replace the boiler. We've done you know, unfortunately, their budget is responsible for the parking lot and lighting piece of it, so that's been taken care of. But overall, the facility is really sound. Are there things that are tired? Yeah. Aesthetically, you know, bathrooms, locker rooms, concession stands, aesthetically are not very pleasing. They don't provide a real good fan experience. You know, you're dealing with a lot of concrete block in that building. It's not what you see when you walk in the convention center or the Denty Sanford Premier Center. You see a lot of tile. You see a lot of nice surfaces. Again, however, structurally is pretty good. HVAC system is pretty sound. Again, we're probably ready for sound systems, and we're probably ready for lighting systems and scoreboards and all that sort of stuff. But again, overall, the facility is pretty sound. So we did, to answer your question, we haven't really lifted our foot on the accelerator. We've maintained that facility pretty well. You know, it looks pretty good yet, but it is an older building. It's 60 plus years old. The stadium, that's been a big focus since we did a study here a couple of years ago. Approximately $2.5 million of repairs were identified in that facility. However, none of those repairs were fan amenity type repairs or enhancements. This is mainly just taking care of that facility. It is weathered it has not weathered very well out of the elements, and it is a old facility. I didn't realize that facility had been built in the 1960s. And it has been renovated a couple different times. It's been added on a couple different times and been renovated once. So there's quite a history behind it. And it's a tired facility. In '92, I remember going there as a kid, and when they renovated it, looked great. But again, there's a lot of time that's gone by, and now it's time to, again, update. So where we go from here, we have a lot of projects in the hopper this year. And I'm working with the folks at SMG to identify how we're going to get all these done, but a lot of them are out there. They've been bid, they've been awarded. And so, again, interior doors. It's not a real sexy project, but again, it's something that needs to be done to have to work. Again, we need to get those done. They're requiring a lot of maintenance, right, Jim? From the staff. And again, so we're gonna finish that project up. The exhibit hall, the ballroom lighting, again, we have metal halide lights in there. Again, they use a lot of electricity. And we are using that ballroom and those EX halls differently now. We do a lot of weddings. We do a lot of trade shows. We do a lot of things where they require different types of lighting. So again, we're going to be updating with RGB LED light fixtures to provide different types of lighting, different types of environments for the clients that are coming in there. It's something I think, Mike, you can probably attest to this too. A lot of the other facilities or newer facilities have this type of technology into them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Besides the energy thing, savings, it allows you with the different light levels, and actually even you can change some of our exterior lighting now. We can change the color of them and create a different ambiance, different things like that. Again, to keep it fresh. One of the other things when we talked on the tour, one of the ongoing upgrades right now that's going on kind of behind the scenes right now is the AV upgrade, which is, again, we're going to have giant TVs in these rooms and screens and a lot of AV technology that is required, that are actually our clients are asking for. Again, it's going to freshen the rooms up and really just make it easy for them to use this equipment than what it is today. We roll in a cart, and this is, again, it works, but it's old technology. We're going to, and again, this is an investment that was made by SMG. This is their investment. This is what they wanted to see the money spent for because it's revenue generating investment. Again, a lot of the stuff that we do talk about in our capital improvement discussions is how are we going to generate revenue with these investments. So again, that's one of the big focuses. Floor box replacement, again, another not so fun project where we're going to be ripping up the floor in the convention center, exhibit hall, ballroom. We're going to be sawing out all those boxes. We have boxes placed all over that floor that are going to get sawed up. New boxes are going to be placed in there so we can distribute our electricity to our trade show clients that are out there so they can power up their booths, because the booths nowadays are using more power than ever. Everybody's got a credit card machine. Everybody's got lighting. Everybody's got something, and it's again something we need to take care of. Event center, we've made a few investments there. There's a new chiller that went out back. Again, when we designed the facility, we put a 300-ton chiller in there. The reason we didn't put a smaller chiller in there to take care of the office space and the box office space was, it really came down to budget. And we think that there is a huge cost savings just by not running that big chiller and putting a small pony chiller in to cool those spaces when the rest of the facility is dark. The payback will be fairly quickly just with this new piece of equipment. Again, we have, a lot of people don't know this, we have a big retention pond out there. Again, we got to make some improvements to that, the way that's drainage, again, why are we having to do that? Well, again, there are things when you build a building that you didn't foresee, the way it was operating, and again, we're going to take care of that. And then it starts to, get into network replacement type stuff, technology.
This building is a big computer system. It's connected wirelessly, and it's wired, and it has a lot of technology in it. And we're gonna start to see replacement of network switches. Again, you say, well, network switches aren't that expensive. Well, when you start looking at it, it's $750,000. So it's something you have to plan for. Again, you can't afford for your network system to go down. All of the HVAC systems run on this sort of stuff. That's the backbone of the building, and it's something we need to plan for. Stadium, again, more repairs there. Our focus this year, again, not anything real fun to talk about. Concrete, that's about all there is out there. But again, it needs to be addressed, it needs to be taken care of. We need to get rid of all of the life safety issues that we have out there. A lot of people don't know this, but you could stand on top of the dugout if you wanted to. And you could fall right into that dugout, and that's a liability issue for the city. And so again, we're putting railings up, and we're gonna take care of that and get rid of those liability issues that are out there. Arena, at this time, we don't have any projects planned for 2019. Again, it all depends on where we decide to go with this facility. Again, that's what you guys are here for. So, as we move forward into the next 5 years, what are we budgeting for, into the next 5 years? And we're still working on our deferred maintenance list with the convention center, but also we are looking at end of life of a lot of systems in there. And there isn't a lot of fun stuff to talk about, but again, it's a lot of the HVAC equipment in those facilities. It's expensive. A lot of people don't really care about it, but when you're sitting in those meeting rooms, and I'm guessing most of you have had meetings over there, if the meeting's hot, meeting room is hot or cold, it's a problem, and we get feedback from that. So again, those are things that we take a look at and say, okay, it's time to probably update this equipment. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. The vestibules are all going to get restored out there. All the doors you're walking in, again, have had a lot of use, and it's time for some renovation there. One that's really behind the scenes that doesn't really have a lot to do with the operation of the building, but it does with the morale of the people out there, is the locker room. Again, we don't have much of a space out there currently, but when you have to load in an event at the convention center and at the Denty Central Premier Center, or even possibly the arena, you have well over, Mike, over 100 people out there at any given time?
Yes.
And we have a locker room designed for about, 25? It's not, it's something that does need to be addressed. Again, generator replacement, concourse meeting room and lighting, again, that's just, you say, we're addressing meeting room lighting, ballroom lighting right now. Well, why didn't we do it all at once? Well, it is a big dollar number to replace all that lighting at once. So again, what we have to do is we have to do it in buckets, and we'll do it over the course of a few years to get that lighting replaced in that building. Yeah. Plus, one of the things that Tom just mentioned is, one of the big things, especially at the convention center, that we run into, and is really just time to get this work done. This is a fairly busy facility, and we struggle trying to find blocks of dates to get this work done. And I'll cover that here in a little bit, but again, it's a huge issue. But we've got to get it done. We work nights, we work weekends, we do all that fun stuff to make this stuff happen. So, event center, again, we do have some projects planned out there. You'll start to see some expensive projects come up. The expansion joint. Well, what's an expansion joint? Well, a lot of people don't know, but we have a lot of people do know. We have an ice hockey rink in the floor. We have a chilled floor. And we have an expansion joint that is not holding up as well as we'd like. So at some point, we're going to have to replace that. And at that same point in time, we'll replace the hockey rink shielding at the same time to accommodate that expansion joint replacement. Lighting control systems are out there. Some HVAC improvements need to be done. We're seeing some things in the HVAC on the mechanical side of the building that we really think need to be addressed as we've lived in the building now 5 years. Aren't operating as efficiently. Are they huge dollar amounts? No, but they are out there to extend the life of that equipment and make sure that we end up with something that's working better than it is today. And then finally, we have scoreboard, video board, ribbon boards, and the control systems, all provided by Daktronics. Again, it's a big dollar amount. I think we got about $4 million planned for that expense. Daktronics tells us it's about a 10-year life for that equipment. Now, do we think we can get more life out of it? Definitely. We'll replace it as it's needed. But again, it all comes down to this technology and that Daktronics provides is it's like an HD TV. Basically, except it's in a big building. And that technology is changing, and so the life cycle of this equipment and getting parts for this equipment, if it does fail, tends to be a challenge. So we got to stay ahead of that. We don't want to get into that break and repair type mode with that, and having to try and source parts off of eBay. So again, we're gonna stay ahead of the curve on it and plan for those investments. And then finally, we got the football turf that we'll eventually have to replace, as that has a fairly short life. You'd think it would last a long time, but again, I think it's a lot of heavy use. And when you take it up and you put it down, that's probably the hardest part of the football turf. Is that it's all held together by Velcro. So there's a lot of repair and maintenance on it. And Jim, you can tell me it did go down here recently, right? Yeah.
Home opener was Friday?
Last Friday. Yeah. So
It was in storage in the nice temperatures that we all had up here, so you can imagine that it was frozen basically. And so it took a while to unthaw and flatten out properly. It was a chore.
it's in cold storage during the winter, so yeah.
It was one of your welcomes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the final two facilities in the arena and the stadium, again, more HVAC, basically, and then the stadium, the report identified some precast and more concrete repairs, door replacements, roof replacements, netting, fencing, painting, locker room and suite remodels is kind of rounds out the bill there at the stadium. And those, going back to the stadium, a lot of that work was identified in an A, B, or C priority. And that holds true with all of our buildings, facility studies that we do, is we ask the consultant that we're working with to prioritize all this stuff for us, and then we try and fit it into the budget model in the finance office, and we work in conjunction with the operator to make sure that we replace it in the right area. Any questions?
The scoreboard, boards were, when do you think we're actually going to pull the trigger? That this year, or?
No, they have a 10-year life. That's what Daktronics is telling us right now is approximately 10 years. And they say approximately.
Yeah.
Could they go longer than that? Sure. They're pretty good technology. They're 10mm technology, so that's pretty good stuff. We got another 5 years yet. We'll see how they go. Right now, they've been operating fairly well. We have had very little repairs with them. The control system is probably something we'll pull the trigger on before we pull the trigger on the boards themselves.
And there's also the technology that changes. I mean, they may work fine, but the technology improves and things that other people are doing.
Right. Yeah. Again, the control system, I'm going to go back to that because that's the computer, that's the brain that operates that entire. That is just a big computer, is really what it amounts to, and that'll be the big thing. It's keeping that guy happy because again, the Summit League really, wants those units working. So does the Stampede, the Storm, and then, any sort of event. Again, it's a fan amenity in there. And again, I think that's what brings people to Sioux Falls because we have so many fan amenities. And again, keeping that facility relevant. We have more competition in the area. Rapid City's building a facility. Fargo's got a facility, so that in Omaha. So again, it's about keeping it relevant so we can keep the people coming in the doors and seeing shows.
And people travel, so they don't know what the stadiums are doing, so you're confused.
Yep.
So we have that program in 2023, in 2023, we don't want, the last thing we want to be is not ready to make that investment when we need to, for both repair and maintenance reasons and also the fan experience. But, so, we'll extend that out as we get closer if we see how things are working, but we're going to be ready to make those investments at the right time.
And I imagine consultants keeping an eye on technology, because sometimes with technology, there's logical jumping off points, like, well, not this year, but this is what's coming, and in 2 years is when you want to make the jump, because the technology will want more than
Right, right. You don't want to make the jump too early either. You don't want to be an early adopter either. You know, so it's something that we have a good relationship with Daktronics, and they have a guy here in town, and again, we have his number, and we talk regularly. There's a lot of Daktronics equipment in Sioux Falls because they are just up north in Brookings, which is fairly convenient. But again, he keeps us up to date with the technology, and again, he brings a lot of new technology too to the Summit League tournament, so we get to see and what they're working on up there, and there's some pretty impressive stuff up there. So.
Good.
Scott, I think it's important also to mention with the video system, those ribbon boards, the revenue generators.
They are.
That $3 to $3.5 million per year of sponsorship. A good chunk of that is because we had those assets to offer people state-of-the-art HD, see your commercial logo during events. So that's a big selling point for sponsors.
Yeah, again, payback. There's a huge payback on that equipment. So. Any other questions regarding that? I covered it pretty quick. I didn't want to get too much into the weeds. I know we talked a little bit on the tour. So again, if you want to pull me aside when we're done, we can talk more about it. But I just enjoy getting those projects done. I look at that facility as it was my own home. And you know, if I've got something in my own home that's broke, I want it fixed here too. So again, it's just how we take a look at it. And we've got an amazing operations manager out there that kind of has the same approach too. And he's always calling us about something, and whether it be big or little, and how it needs to get addressed. So. Okay. All right, let's move on to the campus study. How many people have had a chance to take a look at the campus study that's out there? Okay, quite a few of you, great. I won't go into too much here. Jim, I'll need some of your help here too to talk about loads in on the convention center. But really, the study was really set up. It was primarily focused on the convention center arena in the stadium. There was a piece in there on the Orpheum too. But you know, it really focused on, okay, let's really see how we are using it. It got into the nuts and bolts of how we're using our convention center. And I'm just going to pull out some of the highlights out of that study, and it states here, you know, the utilization of that convention center, believe it or not, is greater than 50 to 70% of the time, 9 months out of the year. There's 3 months out of the year that facility is really, it doesn't generate a lot of revenue. And help me out, Jim, I think there's November, December, and one other July, I think, right? Yeah, where it's, you know, it doesn't generate. That's when we actually get our work done in the facility, a lot of our capital improvement projects done. But again, there are months that we're above 90% at capacity, which is a problem. Because when Terry is trying to, you know, book things into this facility, she's trying to find holes to move things around, and it's a busy facility. And there's just a lot of different types of business that is in there. One of the things that the study did bring up was that Sioux Falls has less sellable convention space than our peers. So if you look at that study, you'll see that in there. There's a nice bar graph in there that shows that Rapid City, Fargo, and Duluth, peer cities of Sioux Falls, have considerably more sellable space. Again, it also notes in there that hotels, restaurants, again, are lacking within a half a mile of those facilities. And again, I think we all know that. It's getting better. You know, we've had an announcement, I think it's a Remedy that's going on in that area, Remedy Brewing Company. Again, not a big help, but it's something. Again, it is an issue that we need to address. Hotels is a big one.
Outside of hotels and restaurants, what else makes it sellable?
Little places to shop, little coffee shops, something else to do. I've got 3 hours in between this and that. What can I do? Walkability, experiences that are available within walking distance.
Would you say transportation would be a part of that too?
It's an issue.
Yep.
Do you currently run shuttles from the conventions to downtown?
We've tried it and it didn't work very well. But, you know, we're in a drive market. We have to remember that. So people here, you know, if you look out at the center, there are a lot of cars out there when there's a convention. We're a drive market. Most of those people don't think anything of jumping in their car and running downtown. or running out to Lake Learning or wherever. At the same time, especially, I think of one group that it was so, well, I'm getting into the weeds, what we're gonna talk about next week, but it was primarily women, and they wanted to jump on a bus or something and have 2 hours at the mall, 2 hours downtown, 2 hours at this cooking class kind of thing. It didn't work. We need transportation for those people, but it's not every week and every day. So we need to have some sort of system where we can call on it when we need it. When it's, you know, in most cities, it's available. It's a given. You have Wi-Fi, yeah. You have transportation, yeah. You have water, yeah. I mean, really, it becomes that norm, the norm.
Does Lyft coming to the market help with some of the feedback you get from those groups? Or?
Yeah, it helps some, but then they have to pay for that. A lot of convention groups arrange for transportation. And then that convention group pays for it. Or in the case of when we tried it that time, you know, I don't remember if the city, it was the trolley, so I guess maybe there was a trial run with the trolley before you guys came here, but people didn't take advantage of it. So you gotta really look at the group, really talk to the group, what is that need in the area of transportation? And when is it? Other groups, we've had buses run on a schedule and it's worked beautifully. But again, there's nothing, or there's not much. You can't walk and shop out at the current facility. There's a couple places to grab a drink or a bite to eat. There are not other attractions, experiences right out there that they can walk to. So now we have the issue.
I don't want to get too far down.
Yeah. I'm
Sure.
sorry?
Just kind of chicken and egg, probably. Would it be fair to say that local conventions with people from the immediate region, because they know where they're going, they tend to drive? I mean, they would be the ones. I'm not going to take a shuttle because I'm from Del Rapids, and I know my way around Sioux Falls. I'm going to get my car and drive. Versus you get the more national or regional that they come and they may not have a car because they flew in or whatever. That's when it was more successful to use
True,
shuttles.
with the exception of if that convention or event is going to hold an off-site activity that's actually theirs, then you bus them to Falls Park or the pavilion to do whatever it is that group is going to do. Then you have to have that transportation running, coming and going.
All right, we'll segue into the arena on what the campus study recommended there. Again, there was a recommendation in there that, you know, the arena has the potential for shows from that 2,000 to 6,000 seat range. Again, I think with the right amenities, I think you could probably make that work. Again, Jim, you're probably more versed in that booking market if there are shows out there like that. But again, you know, is there opportunity?
There is some opportunity for those. The question, I brought it up and talked to some promoters about the opportunity, and we're working on some ideas. Some of the concern and pushback is too many events going on. You know, if you do an event at Sioux Falls Arena, next week you've got Kenny Chesney over at the Premier Center. You're just competing in-house with the bigger. So, and then I've also heard the comment of, well, we already have the district or the pavilion, which
Or we have the hotel center up in Brookings too.
Right, yeah, for those 2,000 to 6,000 seats, you've got more competition in the market,
right,
both within the city and outside the city for those size of events.
Right, and then to complicate those, okay, go ahead.
And Jim, what would like a lower bowl show at the Premier Center see?
It's about 5,000.
So then again, I mean, if you're targeting 6,000, you could just go to the lower bowl of the Premier Center for similar expenses for staff time and a better fan experience. So it kind of shifts over there as well.
Right. Right, well, and I think what complicates that too is obviously the lack of a rigging grid. Like when we went through the tour, you saw that there is no rigging grid in the arena. Again, the loading dock, again, those are all expenses, like the loading dock is a huge expense because you gotta pay for that load in, load out. And without a loading dock, that takes an immense amount of time and labor. Back of house amenities are very, very limited. Again, for the crews that are coming in. And really, again, there's really just no way to create a real intimate setting for any smaller shows for those, say, 2,000 shows there. I think you guys kind of have a makeshift pipe and drape set up there to try and get it to a more intimate setting if you can, but again, it is what it is. So what were some of those recommendations? Again, you know, if we wanted to invest in the arena, they recommended developing a grid system, and I want to say, was it Long Beach, Mike, that they did this?
Yes.
They took an older facility and they put a grid system in up above that could be raised and lowered down from the ceiling. It had that facility, I think, had a high ceiling height. Lighting was attached, sound was attached. Basically, you lower it down, you could actually create a ballroom type event if you wanted to, and curtain it off.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We were in a convention there a couple of years ago for our corporate meetings, and it was amazing to think that was once a regular arena. There was still some seating around, but that was more of a circular building. But it was unbelievable with what they did with curtaining and lights, and then the ability to, I mean, you get a chance to go visit the Long Beach Convention Center Arena website and see what they've done with that. It wasn't cheap.
No, and I'll get to that, but again, the other thing is, they talk about replacing the fixed seating or the retractable seating. Again, those come with a huge cost. I think you're looking at retractable seating roughly around $650,000, and then you're looking at probably close to, if you want to replace the fixed seating, anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million, depending on what type of seat you buy. So again, another big expense. The other one is, and we've touched on it already, is to renovate those existing spaces in that facility, the concessions, the bathrooms, the loading docks, et cetera. It's all concrete block, it's all brick. Again, it's going to take an immense amount of labor and manpower to do that. I think the study folks said they put $100 a square foot in there. I think that's pretty light, personally, in our construction market. But again, all in all, those costs, if we were to do all of that, would cost us anywhere from 2.4 on the low side up to 5.2 on the high side. So again,
that's $6 million, right?
Yeah.
They're never going to hit the low side.
Well, and we've done enough remodels at the city. I can tell you that you're always struggling with older buildings. It's always going to cost you more. And you probably got that same experience.
Yeah.
You had a lot of old buildings at the hospital, and I'm sure saw the same thing. Yeah.
I think we're 2 slides now.
Nope. Convention center, long-term. Again, they talk, well, do you tear down the arena and you double the size of your convention center? And I think that costs us approximately $350 a square foot. I think that's a pretty strong number, quite honestly, but that'd be about a $21 million bill roughly to do that. But if you figure that's tear down in there too, and site prep and soft costs, maybe that's probably pretty close to double that facility.
So point of clarification, if you tore it down and you double the size, so the existing convention center space is 60,500, and you add another 60,500?
Again, I think we'd have to look at that. If you could fit it on that footprint, I'm pretty sure you probably could find it. You'd probably have to take up some space as far as maybe some to get to that point. You probably have to do a little bit of an L shape. I'm not an architect. You might know, but again, I don't think yet. Again, is it possible to stretch that thing out a couple different ways to create space there? Again, something to look at.
Is that like a one-story assumption, or?
Yeah, that the report really didn't go into that level of detail, but again, I'm assuming that is probably a one level. And then the stadium, we talked. The report talks about that, and It didn't give a lot of good recommendations. You know, again, a lot of the teams that we play against in our league have a lot newer facilities, and the attendance is, you know, when I talk with John Kotz, the attendance is quite a bit different in a lot of those other markets. And a lot of it is that they do have quite a bit newer facility than we do. And so, you know, their recommendation is that, you know, we should invest in a new stadium somewhat in the near future if we want to try and, you know, boost attendance out there. So that was one of the recommendations that came out there.
How is attendance different? Like, it's more because of the different facilities?
Well, yeah, in different markets, so like say, for example, let's use St. Paul. You and I have talked about St. Paul. They built a new facility down there. I mean, their attendance is off the charts. I mean, in comparison to what we have here in Sioux Falls. So again, yeah, you've got a bigger market up there, but this is a baseball town. There's a lot of people who like baseball, and we just don't get the numbers there. And again, we kind of saw it with the arena too. You know, when the arena was aging, and we brought events in, you know, we saw there's just those per caps weren't there. There's a lot of things that you know, the fan experience wasn't there. Again, people, when there's a fan experience there, they bring their families, they spend more money, you know, those are the types of things. And again, we have some tired experiences out there. And I think you could attribute that to it. You know, an aging facility doesn't have those things. So. Yeah. Any other discussion points on the study?
One comment that I read in the report was cost of using the Premier Center. I don't recall what page it was on, but are we competitive price-wise?
With Premier Center?
Yes.
Yes.
Look to these guys on that.
Yeah, we are, as far as rental rates, and we check that on a somewhat regular, definitely annual basis, sometimes more frequently, but.
I think the comment may have been related to the smaller venue. He's talking about the arena specifically, and that 2,000 to 4,000 occupant range, that some of those people apparently felt that the Premier Center would be too expensive. I think that was the context.
To take a 2,000 to 4,000 capacity show, and yeah, the expenses to operate the Premier Center for a user are higher than a smaller venue like the Sioux Falls Arena. The difference definitely is the amenities and ease of use. However, you're really limited in the arena. You just can't accomplish what you can accomplish in the Premier Center.
And just food and beverage, for example, the concession stands are so much different in the Premier Center than they are in the arena, and the offerings are totally different. You know, so again, we make a lot of money off of food and beverage, and so if you can't offer those things, you're fighting that losing battle over there all the time, because you can't have that type of sandwich over there that you can't say in the sandwich.
Not good access to new places.
Yeah.
Slows down stuff. So a question for you, Jim, on, because to OT's point, I mean, that people chose the arena because it was a lesser cost because of their budget, whatever it might be. Those concerts that are in that 2,000 to 4,000, I mean, there's fixed costs no matter what, and there's economy of scale, particularly with food and beverage sales. Are there a lot of shows looking for 3,000 to 4,000 seat venue? Can they make money off of it?
They can. Mostly when you get to anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000, they're looking for the venues that the capacity is only 5,000. Something like Swift Pell is perfect for people that can only sell 4,000 tickets, because inherently less seats, less staffing, expenses are less. We certainly have a structure here with the Premier Center that if we do a lower bowl only, our expenses are less. We close off the top and we charge less rent to kind of help that out. Again, if you're looking at, we're talking about the arena, simply the touring shows can't use the arena these days, because they schedule the tour stops so they can come in that morning and get set up, show that night, move on to the next city. Where in the arena, you have to, if you can even rig what they're traveling with, you have to do it a day before they arrive, just because of the time it takes. You have to have lifts, and I think we saw in the walkout, you can't even build the stage until load-in's done, and it's one truck at a time, so it's not very user-friendly with that fact. And again, in the city, if you had somebody coming through that could sell about 2,000 tickets, you've got the Washington Pavilion that got that capacity. If it's a standing room concert, you've got the district that's roughly that capacity. A little smaller than that, Icon Lounge, things like that, Swiftel, up in Brookings, so.
Where you really see events with the seeding would be August Santa basketball, graduation. ELCA did a big event, it was last year. So not really so much concerts as other.
I'd probably throw the circus in there too.
Yeah, circus too, yeah.
Also, and looking at the executive summary, I was kind of struck, by the sporting conversation. It says, with the exception of Augie, there's low demand for new tenants in there. But then it goes on to say there's opportunity if certain improvements are done for additional amateur sports. Can you guys kind of discuss some of the amateur sporting events that are in there now, and what are those opportunities for them?
I think, was it Taekwondo or karate type, martial arts type events have been held in there that facilities have done pretty well.
Karate event that did well, and of course, you've got the state tournaments that we host, and AAU type events, wrestling, basketball. Outside of that, I can't really think of any other sporting events we've done in there recently. You do have dance and cheer competitions that will use that space on occasion. Minor league sports leagues. You have the G-Force that's at Pentagon right now. Augie. Not too many other indoor sports. We've got the hockey and the football. Those are nursing.
The Pentagon kind of complicates things a little bit with that type of facility that it is. So again, that's also a multi-use facility also. So again, I think you could have dance and cheer competitions there too. So you're competing against one another facility in town. Potentially, and again, basketball, and I imagine they can host any sort of martial arts type event or anything like that too. So again, the Pentagon's complicated things also.
Well, and I think that whole facility, campus up there is going to continue to grow with some of their plans will be competition for the complex that we're going up here.
And I think as a city, we don't want to compete with the Sanford complex. We want to see how we can complement each other, because there's no need for us to, go back and forth on competing facilities. So we want to work together to make sure the city is served with these facilities in some way.
So I just wanted to, from the local market analysis, the history that they provided on the convention center space of 6,500 in 1997, it was 24 million, and at their current cost estimate, it's 21. So just rudimentary without a design, we already know that that's low. So, and that was 10 years ago. We got it for 24 million. So.
Yeah, I think somewhere in that study that does talk about a $50 million number too. So again, I think it would take a little bit more research to figure out what it would take to build a new convention center or addition to our convention center.
In order for me to feel comfortable about signing on recommendations, I think we need to do it in multi-level steps. We need to really understand what those costs would be before we would make a recommendation, and if the market would fit it. And so where they have done some of that, I think independently we need to do that again.
Any other discussion before we move on with the agenda? Now, before we talk about the breakout groups, I wanted to talk about our next meeting a little bit, excuse me, which is scheduled for April 24th, 8:30, back at the convention center. We will try to hold the rest of our meetings there with a little bit more space and flexibility for the room layout. And at that meeting so far, we have scheduled the CDB, SMG, the school district, and the sports authority. As we talk about the breakout groups a little bit, if you are identifying or thinking of other resources that you would like to hear from or more information you need, please let us know so we can get those added to the list and make those available to you. I anticipate that next meeting again to be a lot about education like we have for the first couple of meetings. There's a lot to learn with this entire campus, and we can't pretend that even after 3 meetings we're going to know everything. We're still going to be trying to absorb all of this information. But I'd like to try to make the next one, the last one, that's kind of just about education, and then start moving into more of a hypothetical conversation about the entire campus, and start to piecemeal maybe what some of those recommendations might be that we forward on as a group. To help facilitate that, I think it might be a good idea if we instituted a couple of working groups to help keep us moving forward in between meetings. And the different areas that Jeff and I have been talking about, all of this open to conversation, by the way, is the arena, the baseball stadium, the convention center, and then kind of lumping a couple of issues together between parking, customer experience, and connectivity. There's been a couple of comments this morning about connectivity in other parts of the city, and I think it's going to become increasingly important to the success of this campus as well as those areas we'd like to connect to. And then the last one being public input and information. And through this process, as we've been talking about, the more input we can get, the more information we can share better. So that when we get to the end of the process, there aren't any really great surprises about what we're talking about, why we're recommending what we are. I don't want to spend a lot of time today talking about which group you'd like to be part of, but I would like you to take the next couple of days and think about which ones of those you're most interested in. We're going to need you to participate in one, maybe 2 of those groups. Some of it can be done via email, some of it can be done via phone calls. And then we'll be trying to identify kind of a group leader for some of those different areas to help be a catalyst to those conversations and keep them on track and keep them moving forward. So by the time we get to our next meeting, if there are additional resources those groups would like to see, we have them available to you. The downside of that scenario is, and the great thing about this committee, I think, is that we are looking at all these different issues together because they are so intertwined. Parking plays a role in all of these different issues. How much flat floor space we have plays a role into all these different issues. So continual communication between the groups and those monthly meetings is going to be really important. Make sense to everybody?
And as groups, if you want us to reach out, bring resources in to spend time with you, let us know that too. So if you're at the convention center, you want Terry's expertise, that's good. If you want to take that deeper dive into the details.
And to Andrea's point, I think as we start to dive deeper into some different scenarios, it's going to become clear, well, we need to know what that number looks like because we don't know if it's palatable and if it's even feasible. We might need to be calling on some of the professional resources available to this group to help provide some different layouts and different things and how things might look and work as we move forward. Any other discussion about the groups?
Who's on town for next week or next month's meeting?
So far confirmed, we have the CDB, SMG, the school district, and the sports authority.
Can they do a SWOT, like a comparison to their other markets and present that as part of their presentation as well?
Kind of a competitive analysis. So
Yes. We can have them present that too.
Sure.
This is our strengths and weaknesses, this is their strengths and weaknesses.
What are their opportunities that they're missing?
Yes.
What do they need to stay competitive? Kind of that, if I could wave a wand, what do we have to make us better in our market and in our space?
That's exactly what I want.
I think it's a great idea, because Terry's got all sorts of experience about other conventions she's bidding against, and why do we lose some of those? And our SMG resources have a lot of experience outside the community and what other communities are deploying and what's working for them, so absolutely should be part of the conversation. With that, I move to go to item 5, which is public input. If we have any members that do want to address the group or ask, I'll remind you of Jeff's earlier comments that we asked that the content be germane to the conversation we're having today, and that we keep it at 3 minutes or less. Is there any?
And also please introduce yourself.
Say real quick, guys, I was just wondering if we could maybe discuss some of this as a group first. I know we, unlike some of the other boards around town, meet for such a lengthy period of time, 3 hours, and I'm very excited to hear from the people that are here today, and I know the rest of us are. Is it possible that going forward in the future, of course we keep it the way it is today, is it possible to move the public input up to the front of the meeting so people can come and they can stick around for a little bit, but they don't have to take 3+ hours out of work? And perhaps, maybe, I don't know if it's easier to do 20 minutes at the beginning and 20 minutes at the end, but
Sure.
I don't know if that's something we could do, and it's great that everybody stuck around, but that's a long time for people to take out of their day.
It is, and you're right, and I think absolutely something we can explore. I think the format it takes is going to kind of be dependent on the content of that meeting and what information is what we're going to be talking about that day.
Okay.
We'll play a role in how that works, but you're right, we should try to make it as easy as possible. Yes, sir.
I'm Bruce Danielson. I go to a lot of these meetings around town, and Eric, I appreciate your comment about, I'm one of those that'll probably stick around to the end because I video all these meetings that I can get to. But I do want to thank everybody for being as wide open in your discussion today. This is what we, the public, have been asking for. This is why we pushed hard to get these meetings opened up so the public could be here. We really do appreciate it because this is a huge investment. You know, we've got several $100 million invested out there at that complex, and we have to pay taxes here. So we want to make it successful, and we want to be part of the solution and not just sitting back criticizing because, or making it look like we're criticizing because we haven't been able to be here. We haven't been able to be involved in the discussion. So this is actually a really good thing. I would ask, because people have been hounding me to be here to record because it's not on CityLink. And they really would have loved this to be in the council chambers over at Carnegie, or have CityLink be able to record it. And when I was the chairman of the election review committee a few years ago for the county, we insisted that it be recorded by the county so that it could be out there, and it solved a lot of the suspicions that people have by having closed meetings or 8:30 in the morning meetings. You know, if this was recorded and it played at 2 o'clock in the morning, there would be people watching it at 2 o'clock in the morning because they want to see what's going on. You guys have a lot on your shoulders on this thing, and really would like to see it handled in as open a way as possible. And with that, thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Cheryl Rath, and I've followed the discussion on the event center for the past 15 years, beginning with the 2004 Event Center Task Force, which considered an event center downtown and a recreation center at Nelson Park. I then went on to co-chair the petition drive to save Drake Springs as an outdoor pool. In May of 2008, I began attending what became known as the 2009 Event Center Task Force, and I continued to attend all of those meetings for 13 months. As a private citizen, I was always made to feel welcome by the co-chairs, Terry Balloon and Jim Wooster. The meetings were guided by a professional facilitator, the Winkles Group. I believe that the current administration's decision to close these meetings of the Events Center Study Group was a major misstep. I'm here today to say as a taxpayer that I'm glad that that decision has been reversed. And I thank you to all that were a part of that. And it's been interesting to listen to the discussion this morning because many of the things that have come up today were on the table 10 years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Teresa Staley, and again, I want to echo what was just said, that opening this thing up was fabulous. I wish all my colleagues could have been here today to listen to this discussion. And it reminds me of what happened when we had that annexation task force that a lot of people attended. We had citizen members of that, and citizens bring such a wonderful perspective to the discussion. So this whole thing was great. I do agree with Bruce Danielson that this should be videotaped, and I'm actually going to send an email to the mayor and the media when I'm done here, thanking the media for being here, but also asking if the mayor could video this, which is definitely within our realm of capabilities, and put this out there so the citizens can see this, because they want to be involved. When you shut the door on them, even though you can get things done more efficiently and quickly, it really creates a bad taste in the mouth of our people. The other thing I want to say is that we're talking about huge amounts of money here. I am advocating, and I have advocated from the beginning, that whatever happens, if this is involving big changes, needs to go to a public vote. I will always be grateful to Mayor Huther for allowing the citizens to vote on that event center, because it wasn't just rammed down their throats, but it was a community discussion. So the more we can have this thing as a fluid discussion is going to be great. Government is messy. Government is burdensome. It's when you got the people's money involved, it takes time to work it through. So I'm so grateful for all of you, because you bring such expertise to this discussion. I'm grateful for the 100 people who wanted to be a part of it. The fact that 100 people applied means that this was an important thing for our community. So thank you so much, and I'll be back.
Thanks, Teresa. Anybody else? Thank you for your input, folks. Any closing comments from the committee? Thoughts, discussion?
Again, really appreciate your time. Don't forget to spend a little bit of time thinking about those different groups, and email Jeff and I hopefully before the end of this week. And see you, if not before, we'll see you on the 24th.
Thank you. Adjourned.